with more following on from Wednesday and Trump and Bibi Netanyahu. What do we say about that?
Well, just some more information has surfaced on this, Mike. It's getting more interesting, but we'll put this lead image up on screen here. What we're calling this is the latest timeshare scam in Gaza. There's Trump getting it ready here. Where did this idea come from? That's the big question. We'll get to some answers to that in a second. Like, who dreamt this up? Was this something that Trump dreamt up, or was it given to him by Netanyahu, or did it come from somewhere else? We think we know the answer to this, and we'll share that with you in short order. But the backlash from this, Mike, has been unbelievable. Internationally, we'll talk about that as well. Also domestically, but even in Israel, there's even backlash from some of the hardcore Zionist camps. They don't like certain aspects of this. They don't like the fact that the United States was going to come and occupy their land in Gaza. This is how some Israelis who view Gaza as their land, they're not happy about this at all, Mike. So this is very interesting how Trump, through his Bolshevik style, as usual, has basically wiggled everything loose, and everything is completely up in the air at the moment.
Yes, indeed. Mark, it'd be very interesting to get your thoughts on this. And the question is whether Trump is beginning to backtrack, maybe?
Perhaps so. It's a very audacious proposal, of course, to say the U.S. would elbow its way in there. And I think it's not surprising in one sense. The U.S. is more or less the Roman Empire of the modern times. Wherever its military touches, wherever its power goes, that is its domain. And so it could be, on the one hand, a buffer to keep the IDF from doing the very worst anymore in Gaza. The U.S. would be part of a new two-state solution, right? The U.S. and Israel would be the two-state solution rather than Israel and Palestine. But at the same time, where would the United States get the authority, despite its Romanesque, Caesaresque kind of behavior? It really doesn't have the authority to just simply move in there and literally take ownership. But again, Trump tends to kind of overextend himself for strategic and leverage reasons, and then he ends up kind of backing off a little bit. Will he actually do this is the big question.
Yeah, go ahead.
No, you go ahead.
Well, I think it's just absolute nonsense. I mean, what he said is one of the most ridiculous things that Trump's ever done in public, and that's saying a lot. He has said some crazy things over the years, but this is just totally divorced from reality. And, you know, you have to assume that he or Netanyahu are negotiating in good faith. That would be your first mistake, because clearly they're not, if you look at what's happened over the last 15 months. The other thing is, as usual, Trump slipped and said, oh, the king in Jordan and the general in Egypt, if they're going to make some land available, that means that they want to turf the Palestinians out, with U.S. troops at gunpoint, Trail of Tears, just like the Cherokees marched to Oklahoma. I mean, this isn't going to happen. So I don't see anything realistic in all of this. I agree with what Mark said. It's a ham-fisted way of creating leverage. But the international backlash and the fact that it's exposed the ethnic cleansing agenda now, like there's no hiding it. It's literally Trump, the property developer. So anyway.
Well, let's look at whether they're pulling back a little bit from the position. Here is the lovely Catherine.
The president has not committed to putting boots on the ground in Gaza. He has also said that the United States is not going to pay for the rebuilding of Gaza. His administration is going to work with our partners in the region to reconstruct this region. And let me just take a step back here, because this is an out-of-the-box idea. That's who President Trump is. That's why the American people elected him. And his goal is lasting peace in the Middle East for all people in the region.
And the thing about it is, he's not talking about paying for the redevelopment of Gaza. He's also not talking about paying for whatever it is he's proposing that all the Palestinians go to live in. He's just basically proposed dump them in the middle of the desert somewhere and leave them to it.
But when he was with Netanyahu, he said that we're going to build it and we're going to have long-term ownership. The U.S. is going to have a long-term ownership position. So that's all. 24 hours later, That's all being walked back. And it's an out-of-the-box idea because that's what President Trump is like. So actually, no, this is not an out-of-the-box idea. We did a little bit of digging, and it wasn't long before we found out where this idea came from. And it came from what I call the nepotistic nightmare that is Donald Trump's son-in-law, aka the president-in-law. I don't know anybody that voted for Jared Kushner, but somehow we've got a Jared Kushner administration. Watch this.
In Gaza's waterfront property, it could be very valuable to, if people would focus on kind of building up, livelihoods. You think about all the money that's gone into this tunnel network and into all the munitions. If that would have gone into education or innovation, what could have been done? And so I think that it's a little bit of an unfortunate situation there. But I think from Israel's perspective, I would do my best to move the people out and then clean it up. But I don't think that Israel has stated that they don't want the people to move back there afterward. The thing that I would try to do if I was Israel right now is I would just bulldoze something in the Negev. I would try to move people in there. I know that won't be the popular thing to do, but I think that that's a better option to do so that you can go in and finish the job.
That's the guy that's in charge. He's running point for Donald Trump's Israel-Palestine issue. That's the author of the Abraham Accords. That's not like nobody. It's not some random guy talking. That is literally Donald Trump's right hand. And he's just told you what the agenda is there.
Right.
So that's kind of like where this came from. And by the way, this has been confirmed by the Times of Israel that it was Jared Kushner who gave him the idea. And what happened, according to reports, Mike, is that Trump was briefed by a couple of people and he got a little bit confused before the Netanyahu press conference, and he just kind of synthesized it together like an omelet, Trump style, and it just kind of blurted out. And like everyone, the whole world is like trying to deal with the fallout.
Yeah. Okay. But in the meantime, if we bring the conversation a bit back to reality, Netanyahu presented Trump with something pretty dark, actually.
This is really something I don't know. So this is a golden pager. This is presented by Netanyahu to Donald Trump. It says, to President Donald J. Trump, our greatest friend and ally, Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu. And this is a pager. He's making a joke about the pager attack allegedly against Hezbollah in Lebanon, which killed 37 people, injured and maimed thousands, including children and bystanders. And this is a stolen olive tree cross-section from Lebanon with a golden pager pressed with both hands. It's just a sick joke presented to the president here by a wanted war criminal with the ICC, Netanyahu. I mean, talk about bad taste, okay? This is so tone deaf. Now, is it worse that he's giving this gift, or is it worse that the president accepted it? And that's the conundrum you're in with Israel. It's like, you can be a billionaire, you can be the richest man in the world, but you can't buy class. And that's the problem with Netanyahu and the way things are going in this relationship.
Indeed. And but Mark, just to finish this segment off then, the issue of ISIS.
Yeah, let's put that up on the screen if you would, Mike, that slide. Trump at that press conference with Netanyahu, a joint press conference, referred to his first term, and he said that he and Bibi put together plans then that brought peace and stability to the Middle East, much more so than in many decades. And together, he and Bibi defeated ISIS, and that was referring to Trump's first term, and ended the disastrous Iran nuclear deal. He threw that in. But this December 9 headline from just last December from the Pentagon, Department of Defense mission to defeat ISIS remains ongoing in Syria. The Defense Department's mission to defeat ISIS remains ongoing in Syria, says in the subhead, Deputy Pentagon Press Secretary Sabrina Singh said today. And that was December 9th of just this last year. So ISIS still lives. The dragon still lives. They didn't slay the dragon. And I did a little reading up, and the October 7 alleged attack, at least alleged in the way they described it, that was the powder keg for the entire war on Gaza. There are some at least tenuous connections, even though they say it was mainly engineered by Hamas. There are some connections in the greater Islamic world of ISIS with that attack. At least there are claims of it. So there's a lot of irony there that not only did they not defeat ISIS, but ISIS may have had at least a secondary involvement in the events of October 7th. So there's a lot of misstatements going on that just don't ring true, that surround this whole issue.
You don't agree with that?
I would push back against that. I've seen those claims, and a lot of them originate from Israeli sources or kind of conservative U.S.
But what we can't
media.
say, on the other hand, is that U.S. money and arms have been funding and arming ISIS in Syria, for example, and other places.
ISIS tried to emerge in Gaza, and they got pushed out by Hamas and chased out, basically. They shut it down pretty quickly. You don't have Gaza is a pluralistic society with Orthodox Christians, Catholics, Protestants, Muslims, Shiites, mix of people, Druze as well.
Yeah.
So it's a pluralistic, multi-ethnic, multi-religious tapestry. It's always been that way. So, but the West are trying to portray it as radical Islam, and then trying to portray Hamas as a radical Islamist terrorist organization. But Hamas was founded by the Israelis themselves to create a counterbalance against the Yasser Arafat and the PLO,
Right.
funded by Israel, because they wanted to create a radical image of Gaza so that they could do what they're doing to it right now. And what happened was Hamas kind of grew out of control, even out of Israeli control, and it became something that they couldn't handle at some point. Sound familiar? Israel itself, when
Right.
the United States, Israel became something that we can't handle.
Yeah.
But I will say the other thing is there is no truth at all that the U.S. and Israel defeated ISIS. In fact, ISIS never attacked Israel. The one time it did, it apologized. Okay. Israel acted as ISIS's air force in Syria for years. The United States hit Syrian troops, hit Russian troops to defend ISIS positions. And the U.S. did not engage ISIS on the ground. ISIS was engaged by the Iranian Quds forces, the Iraqi Hashd al-Shabi, People's Mobilization Units, and Hezbollah. They defeated ISIS on the ground. I was in Iraq in the liberation of Iraq when they defeated ISIS in Iraq. Okay, so I can tell you I was there, and the U.S. did nothing. All the U.S. did was flatten Mosul and flatten Raqqa and kill about 20,000 civilians in the process, and very few ISIS fighters. The Russians, on the other hand, dealt a huge blow to ISIS in Syria. They were actually hitting targets, unlike the United States, who blew up quite a few empty buildings and killed a lot of civilians, and then basically backed off and declared victory. I mean, it's the biggest farce that the U.S. defeated ISIS. It's one of the biggest lies going, and they're still trading off it. And yet, as Mark pointed out, even though they claim they defeated ISIS, that's still the official reason why they're in Syria. So, I mean, the whole thing is a joke.